I'm Dr. Jennifer Guttman. Welcome to my new series, A Path to Sustainable Life Satisfaction. My mission is to use my experience and expertise to help you realize the kind of life satisfaction that's dependent on no one but you to sustain it. It's a theory that I have researched and developed from cognitive behavior therapy and refined over my 20 years of successful interaction with clients. I have created a blueprint that sees them self-reliant and effective in every area of their lives. They channel their strengths, not their weaknesses. They no longer look for approval outside of themselves. Instead, reinforcement comes from within. I help people master their lives by utilizing 6 empowering components that comprise my sustainable life satisfaction techniques. The first component is starting is easy, but closing is hard. Learning the importance of closing tasks, not just starting them. It's imperative to finish and close tasks. The second component is decision-making. Feeling confident in decision-making. Without fearing mistakes or ramifications improves self-confidence and in turn improves chances for closing. The third component is facing fears. Don't be afraid to be afraid. Use your fear as positive motivation to propel you to move forward. The fourth component is reduce people-pleasing behaviors. Avoid codependency and learn to live an authentic life without living in service of others. Watch people-pleasing behaviors which secure feelings of indispensability while averting fears of abandonment. The fifth component is avoiding assumptions. Avoid making assumptions about what other people think or feel about you. Your actions should be based on fact and not assumptions. Making decisions about how to proceed in a given situation based on guessing instead of facts is a dangerous exercise. The sixth component is active self-reinforcement, providing tangible reinforcement for closing or a job well done. Make a cognitive shift from aspiring and needing reinforcement and praise from others to be willing to accept self-praise. These techniques will assist you in believing in your personal effectiveness in the world, as well as give you a profound sense of personal control of outcomes. Today, there are too many people peddling happy, but happy is not sustainable. Happy is a dopamine push or a feeling predicated on something outside of yourself. This is unreliable, and the world think on this is not working. Satisfaction, however, is sustainable. Contentment is sustainable, and I'm going to show you how. My brand therapy is based on the precept that the majority of people do not have an inherent belief in their lovability, and it's crippling their lives. I know the struggles many of us face because I've been there, and I've found that no matter how successful a person is, if they don't feel inherently lovable, they are perpetually disappointing themselves. I was that person. I started out as someone extremely shy and insecure. I didn't believe I was the smart one. I didn't believe I was the capable one. And I certainly didn't believe that I was lovable. But I refused to fuel my disappointment, and as a result, I became defiantly resilient. Everything that life threw at me, I tossed it back. I dealt with adversity and rejections head on by learning how to differentiate between what was working and what was not. Now, I know if you're motivated. You are the only tool necessary because you are the change agent. The first important component in my brand strategy involves learning to become a closer. Have you ever wondered if you're a starter or a closer? Over the years, people have asked me what are my pet peeves, and I'm honest with them. I have trouble when people don't follow through with what they say they're going to do. I admire people that say that they're going to do something and then do it. They're what I like to call closers. At an early age, I became aware that both my grandmother and my father completed each task that was given to them. I recognized that this trait brought each one of them some degree of pride. It became a trait that I really wanted to emulate. I found myself becoming impatient with people who didn't follow through. I wondered whether people who don't follow through felt that same impatience with themselves. Doing what you say you're going to do is not easy for anyone. As someone who works hard to practice what she preaches, I work hard to complete tasks, and I remind myself that I always feel better when I complete more tasks than when I start more and complete less. I feel more confident when I know I can rely on myself to follow through on what I've promised myself I'm going to do, and that others can rely on me for the same. Starting is easy, but closing is hard. It's not surprising that starting is the easy part, right? Have you wondered why? Well, starting is fun and exciting. Starting only seems challenging. Why is closing so really hard? Closing it's boring, and it requires accountability and work and organizational skills. However, with the challenge comes a sense of effectiveness at having been able to conquer the mundane stuff, not just the fun. And I can tell you that that feeling of self-efficacy develops into self-confidence and self-respect, and it's priceless. Now, have you figured out yet if you're a starter or a closer? If you haven't, that's okay. A lot of people don't know. And here's why. As children and as adolescents, we are reinforced by our parents for our creative ideas. This reinforcement is enough to make the actual execution of the idea seem unnecessary. Our parents also reinforce us for project progress. This support serves as enough reinforcement so that when the process becomes too boring, it's easy to abandon it. As adults, the adrenaline rush we get from dreaming about a project feels great. We've all felt that experience of sitting around a table with friends, scheming about the next billion-dollar idea, right? Mostly the dreaming ends around that table, because acting on the fantasy is so much harder than the table talk. I don't want you to settle for the rush of being a starter. I want you to be determined to become a closer. Let's start with a few examples. Like following through on a plan you made with yourself to exercise, let's say 3 times a week. Telling someone you'll call at a certain time and actually following through. In each of these examples, you're doing it because it will make you feel better about yourself. So here's a few points on how to be the most successful at this. Do not move too quickly to the next enticing project. Complete those last pesky details from the last one. Focus on the goal, which is actually closing. Keep telling yourself to slow down, even though it's so exciting to move on. Effective closing is a stepping stone in developing a feeling of effectiveness in the world. It's about committing to keep your life in order and honoring your word. And what you'll find is as your self-reliance grows, so will your feelings of confidence. Yes, it requires patience. Yes, it will change the way you think. But once you buy into it, it's amazing and your whole world starts to change. That's when the penny will drop. Don't delay it. Hold yourself accountable. And close. You got this. I've discussed why starting is easy, but closing is hard. Now I'd like to talk about making decisions, which is another important component of mine that I know can help change the way you think for the better. I'm passionate about helping people live better lives. It's my life work, and listening to my clients over the years has really shaped the way I think as a therapist and a human being. In fact, it's the interaction with many of my clients which helped me identify that decision-making is a necessary tool in attaining life satisfaction. Without being able to make decisions for yourself, you feel inadequate and powerless. That's not a good recipe for life satisfaction. Don't you agree? Let me tell you about a client of mine, Suri. While her name is a pseudonym, her story is real. When I met Suri, her response to any question I posed was, "I don't know." She couldn't even answer the simplest questions. She consistently asked far too many questions at work, annoying coworkers and employers, and sadly, she never had the courage to express an opinion on any topic because she had a deep-seated fear of being decisive. Do any of you have a Suri in your life? Unfortunately, many of my clients are happy and feel a sense of relief when they delegate decision-making to friends. And it's usually about making very simple decisions, like where to go to dinner or what movie to see, or asking their parents to make even more important decisions for them, like what college to go to or what job to take. Why is it so very hard for some people to make decisions on their own? People are terrified to the point of inaction about making a mistake. In today's glossy social media world, everyone looks like they have it going on. Everyone looks like they have the perfect life. However, the operative word is looks like. It's deceiving, and it's meant to dupe you into believing that they have it all figured out. But guess what? They don't. Everyone, and I mean everyone, is just guessing. Is this a behavioral pattern? And if it is, how did it start? The truth is, parents often swoop in and make decisions for their children. They have good intentions. They simply want to save their children from heartache or stop them from making the same mistakes that they made. However, this backhandedly undermines their child's belief in their own decision-making ability. It sets up a precedent in which the child or even a young adult really believes that the parent has all the answers. Newsflash, they don't. They're just guessing too. Maybe they're guessing with a little bit more life experience, but they're still guessing. As one of my clients astutely put it, you have a different fingerprint than your parents, so what worked well for them might not work well for you. Let's talk about how to conquer fears of inadequacy around making decisions. The first thing to remember is that there are no right or wrong decisions. Every decision is changeable and not a lifelong commitment. Give yourself the freedom to know that it's better to cope with a mistaken choice and change course rather than never make a decision out of fear of consequences. The consequence of giving into fear is much greater. So take a leap of faith. Being brave and courageous enough to know you can cope with making an educated decision is important, even if they don't turn out as expected. The fact you're managing and accepting responsibility for them will help you build sustainable confidence and competence. When you delegate choices, it just reinforces feelings of inadequacy. Here's how I explain it to my clients. If you put 10 people in a room and ask them to make a decision by choosing option A or option B, 5 people will choose option A and 5 people will choose option B. Neither group of people would be wrong. Why? Because everyone is guessing based on the limited amount of information that I've given them. You may also be surprised to know that it's very common for some people who initially chose either option A or B to change their mind. And that's okay. It just means that it didn't work out as expected, and they have the self-confidence and flexibility to know when to change course. The second thing I teach clients is that laboring over a decision is a waste of precious mental energy. People should give themselves just enough time to gather information before making a decision. Of course, the time needed to do this is dependent on the decision being made. The strategy can also work for even the most mundane decisions. For example, if you're going shopping for clothes, give yourself, say, 10 minutes to decide what you're going to buy. If you're going to purchase a car, gather information before you go and then give yourself a certain amount of time in order to make the purchase. The decision is yours to make. It may not be easy at first, but just start practicing making a couple of decisions on your own every single day. Start making small decisions, like I cited earlier, and then move on to bigger decision making. You'll be surprised how much more confident you feel. Now, do you remember my client story? Well, she doesn't say, "I don't know" anymore. We put a moratorium on that early on. She has gained confidence to make her own decisions. Although she has found happiness in doing so, she still finds it hard not to question the decisions she makes, but she understands she has to keep working on it every single day. I value when people push themselves and really address feelings of inadequacy. Does it require courage? Absolutely. Patience? Count on it. By making your own decisions, you learn to trust in your ability to cope with the fear and anxiety that comes with it. The ability to cope with that fear will become pride, which will translate into feelings of self-worth and eventually a belief in your lovability. Make a decision today. Don't delegate. Take that leap, any leap. Trust yourself. Believe in yourself. You know you. You got this. I've discussed how to become a closer and be a powerful decision maker. Now I'd like to share another important component that will help you reach more life satisfaction by making a seismic shift in the way you think. It's learning to face your fears. Have any of you ever tried facing a fear every day? I'm not talking about facing an athletic challenge like running a marathon or bungee jumping. I'm referring to facing an inner fear that you may have to deal with on a daily basis, or the kind of inner fear that you struggle with repeatedly. When my children were young, I used to put them on the bus and ask them to come home and tell me what fear they faced that day. I didn't mean they should come home and tell me that they had had a tough exam or done something dangerous or harmful. I just wanted them to share something they did to conquer or overcome an insecurity they had been avoiding. Well, I can tell you they came home with some fabulous stories about talking to teachers at school they were afraid of, handling conflicts with others, challenging themselves on the playground. After listening to their stories, I felt I should practice what I preached, so I began facing my own fears. I made it a practice to begin each morning asking myself, what fear should I face that day? I started with simple fears like making a telephone call I had been avoiding. My children and I improved multifold. Our sense of self-confidence and feelings of effectiveness in the world grew immensely. And you know what? So did our ability to manage within it. I was so happy with our results that I started giving my clients homework assignments to go out and face a fear every day. Over the years, many of them have experienced the same level of improvements that my children and I did. They no longer shy away from their inner fears. They're actually propelled by them because overcoming these fears moves them forward. I realized that for confidence to be more than skin deep, we need to challenge ourselves to face our inner fears on all levels. Be they fears of inadequacy or insecurity, fears of interacting with others, or the fear of avoiding tasks. No matter where they stem from, we need to conquer them. If we're successful, we will gain feelings of self-respect, self-confidence, and a feeling of competence in the world. Scheduling something to do that you're afraid of every day is a hard task. However, try this approach. Lie in bed for an extra minute every morning, mentally scroll through your day, identify where you can face a fear that day, and then close. Make the decision. You will be amazed over time at how much more confident you will feel. Many people start off challenging themselves to small fears. As they get bolder and stronger, they start working their way up the ladder, tackling bigger tasks, whether it's related to projects or people. Once they're successful a few times, facing a fear every day will become easier. It's not surprising, though, that facing fears is hard. Again, as children, we start dealing with different forms of fear at a very young age. Most parents really don't like to see their children anxious or distressed. For this reason, when a child or adolescent looks uncomfortable in a given situation, it's not uncommon for a parent to step in and rescue that child from the situation. This may make the child or the parent feel much better. However, it's only a temporary solution, one that doesn't reinforce a feeling of competence in the child to be able to fight through feelings of fear and get stronger. It also doesn't show the child or adolescent they can survive feelings of insecurity and overcome them. Although this is done with the best of intentions, the feeling of being rescued conditions us to either seek ways to escape fear or to be rescued from them the next time they occur. Either way, we're going to believe we may not have the skills to face or survive our fears without assistance. Are any of you experiencing any of these feelings now, or have you ever experienced them at any time in your life? Raise your hands if you have. As you can see, you're not alone. Facing a fear every day is important. Why not make it a part of your daily routine, like brushing your teeth? The more habitual it becomes, the more you will feel like you can conquer any challenge that life puts in front of you. It may be hard to do in the beginning, but you can do it. With patience, determination, you can conquer anything. Now, let's talk about some examples about fears people can face. I'm going to start with several low-level fear-inducing tasks and then work my way up a ladder of intensity, because that's the way that you should think about facing them as well. Like changing your order in a restaurant, or going back to the gym after a hiatus, talking to a professor or your boss about a problem you're having with an assignment, going alone to the movies, starting a conversation with someone that you've never met, stating an opinion in a conversation even though you're afraid you might be ridiculed. What's essential is realizing that you're not facing these fears so that you have a victory story to go tell your family or to go tell a friend for recognition. You're doing it because it will make you feel better about yourself. You have the ability to conquer your inner fears and develop your coping skills to the point where you're facing fears head on and not looking to be rescued. So again, in order to master facing fears, make it a point to face a fear every day, and you'll discover, like I did, that it's well worth it. I can't emphasize enough that in order to achieve life satisfaction and trust in your inherent lovability, facing fears is part of a daily regimen and an important stepping stone. You have to be on a mission to get to a place like this. But as you conquer it, your feelings of self-reliance and self-respect will increase. So be compelled to go for it. Aim for your best self and be determined to see it through. And always remember, you got this. My sustainable life satisfaction techniques are designed to help you master your life through 6 empowering components that will help you become self-reliant and profoundly effective at channeling your strengths. I've shared with you the importance of being a closer and completing tasks, the defining difference of being a decision maker, and why facing fears will move you forward. Now we're going to look at another game-changing component: reducing people-pleasing behaviors. I want you to stop putting the work into other people and bring it home. Your sense of self shouldn't be based on what other people think. I can tell you from personal experience that any feelings of insecurity and inadequacy are not fixable there. Focus on yourself and do the critical work of knowing you are enough. The woman that inspired me to begin studying and exploring the role of people-pleasing behaviors on human interaction is actually not a psychologist. She's an integral member of the recovery community and known for her books on codependency. Her name is Melody Beatty. As I read about codependency, I realized that utilizing that term to apply only to the recovery community seemed too narrow. Most of the behaviors that she identifies as indicators of codependency are typical of all human beings and not just those in recovery. However, if a behavior is typical, does that make it adaptive? I don't believe so. In the recovery community, the behaviors that are considered codependent are not considered representative of the healthiest interactions. I believe you have to look at each behavior in isolation. You can't just assume they only occur in those recovering from addictions or in family members of those in recovery. What I discovered is that you'll find many of these same behaviors occur maladaptively in relationships in the broader community. I started asking my clients to review Beatty's list of codependent behaviors and identify which behaviors applied to them. You should know that most of these clients were not in recovery. Since most clients experienced many codependent behaviors, they would ask me, if everyone does all of these, why is it wrong? My response is that many people are struggling in all types of relationships, and there must be a reason for this. People-pleasing behaviors is a form of codependent behavior, and I believe that reducing these behaviors is necessary in order to achieve life satisfaction. Why? As Beatty states, people-pleasing can be overt or covert. For example, we may run around fussing over others, chattering a mile a minute, when what we are really saying is, I hope I'm pleasing you. Or we may be more covert, quietly going through life making important decisions based on pleasing others. The problem is that in these scenarios, people's reinforcement for their self-worth comes from outside of themselves as opposed to coming from within. It comes with the approval given to them from other people. Yet outside reassurance is fickle and unreliable. It will never be enough if you don't believe in yourself. Since external feedback is not constant, it then erodes our feelings of self-confidence and discredits our belief in our lovability. As people, we pressure ourselves trying to please others in an attempt to reinforce our worth. We desperately try to anticipate others' needs, hoping for the reinforcement we get from knowing we helped. Yet we resent it when our efforts aren't acknowledged or reciprocated. The problem is when the reassurance isn't forthcoming or the kindnesses are not reciprocated, it erodes an already fragile sense of self. So what does one do? You must learn to look inside yourself for reassurance about your self-worth, the worth you've been seeking from others. Since it's so common, you have to ask yourself, how did this behavior start? Beatty notes that this behavior starts when we're children. People-pleasing is a behavior we may have adapted to survive in our family. We may not have been given permission to please ourselves, trust ourselves, and to choose a course of action that demonstrated self-trust. Sometimes in families, the implicit message is put others before yourself. However, if you always do that, who then is responsible for taking care of the self that God gave you? And if the idea is to delegate that responsibility, is that really fair to the person to whom you're delegating such a big job? No. I've learned it can be really hard to rehabituate behaviors that have been learned for so many years. But here's how change begins. First, try to stop guiding, problem solving, offering advice, or doing things for your family and friends unless you're specifically asked. And I mean specifically asked. As in, Jennifer, will you do X for me? Or, Jennifer, what do you think I should do about X? Otherwise, just listen. It's okay to be compassionate without offering unsolicited advice. When specifically asked for advice, you can give it. Remember, the reason you want to stop this behavior is because it sets you up to want to be thanked. Next, don't do anything that you don't want to do, hoping that you will get the same treatment down the line. Remember, people cannot be relied on to treat you the same way that you treat them. Lastly, do things for others because you want to. And be comfortable knowing that it's unlikely that you will receive anything in return immediately or in the future. You are the only one that needs to believe in you. If the focus of control is on others for reinforcement of your value, then any feelings of life satisfaction you have will always be transient. I know it seems hard. But it's not as hard as you think once you get comfortable in your own skin. A quintessential moment for me came the day I showed up at the will call booth to pick up my theater ticket. And the ticketing guy said, "Wow, you treat yourself well." And I said, "Yes, I do." I knew that I earned that ticket and I was comfortable being there by myself. Since then, I practiced the power of yes, I do as a commitment to myself. A key component of learning to love yourself is to believe in your value. Own that value and don't delegate the reinforcement of that value to others. It's much too precious. Retain the role for yourself. You got this. A life of sustainable satisfaction isn't based on others. It's based on you. I'm pushing you to be effective in all areas of your life by reinforcing yourself against the behaviors that undermine your success. Now I want to talk to you about avoiding assumptions, which is an essential component in helping you evaluate your life with a clear understanding. Many cognitive behaviorists call this behavior fortune telling. Fortune telling means that you expect bad things to happen. Assumptions are slightly different, and I want to focus and share my views about what makes them different. Assumptions imply that you can predict the future. People usually believe they know what another person is going to do because they presume to know what another person is thinking. Here's the problem. They can't. They're just guessing. There's absolutely no way for us to predict what another person is thinking or what they're going to do. That seems pretty logical, doesn't it? We're not mind readers. So why is making assumptions such a normal habit in our lives? We make assumptions in an attempt to control outcomes. We believe that if we can anticipate what other people are going to do, then we can be one step ahead of them. We also do this because we don't like the fear we experience not knowing what another person is thinking or what they may do. We also don't trust in our own ability to cope with whatever they may be thinking or what action they may take. This is because of our inherent feelings of ineffectiveness or inadequacy in the world. As a result, a domino effect occurs. We make decisions about how to act based on guesswork. This then sets off a series of events that may or may not have occurred. If only we had waited to see what another person was actually going to do. Let me share an example so you can see if it resonates with you. You're on a date with someone you find very attractive. Although you try to focus on the conversation, your inner monologue is that there's no way this person will go out with you again because you're not attractive enough for them. You feel defeated for much of the date. At the end of the date, you find out that the other person thinks you're actually quite attractive. What does this say about you? It says, first, you're not living in the moment. Second, you're trying to anticipate future negative consequences in order to handle a potential rejection. And third, it says you're making inaccurate assumptions. I evaluate each scenario that a client brings to me, pointing out assumption, 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 because frequently there's no fact. You should do this too. Look at situations in your life carefully and identify how you're acting based on assumptions you're making. Let me give you a way that you can evaluate this yourself. The first thing you need to do is ask yourself, where is the evidence? What do I mean by that? Most people are predisposed and operating based on assumptions when they really should be looking for evidence. We go off to the races based on what we believe other people think, and it creates bad scenarios based on information that's not fact. Unless there's physical or verbal evidence of a thought or action from another person, you'll be operating based on a projection of your own insecurities or your own history. That's just really not okay. You need to be patient and not act prematurely. Acting without evidence leads to really bad outcomes, and it reinforces personal feelings of inadequacy. If you're anything like me, you may find it hard to recall all these instructions by memory. So don't be afraid to work it out in your head and then write it out on a piece of paper like this. Identify a situation that's making you feel badly. Ask yourself, do I actually know what this person is thinking? Ask yourself, do I actually know what this person is going to do? Then, only proceed with a reciprocal action, verbal or physical, if you find hard evidence of what a person is thinking or going to do. Become your own private investigator. Look for the evidence and learn to pump up the communication with people as opposed to guessing and making assumptions. Each week, in my efforts to change the way the world thinks, I try to explain how these behavior patterns start. As children, we desperately want to make our parents proud of us. We start guessing about how they may think about us or our behavior in certain situations. We gauge our behavior based on this guesswork. When they give us feedback, we judge our ability to be fortune tellers. We've already tried to anticipate consequences in an effort to control outcomes. Later, armed with our own sense of how good we think we are at this very maladaptive behavior, we go out into the world. We attempt to utilize this behavior in many interpersonal relationships to reduce the potential for emotional pain. But you have to stop acting based on assumptions and force yourself to cope with the fear and insecurity. You also have to learn to wait for a situation to unfold organically. If you can do that, your feelings of competence will improve. Just remember, you only have control of yourself, and you can't control other people's thoughts, their feelings, or their actions. So don't add to your insecurities. Let them go and allow them to be replaced with feelings of self-confidence and feelings of the lovability you deserve. You got this. Welcome to the final episode of my new series, A Path to Sustainable Life Satisfaction. In previous episodes, I've discussed how to become a closer, the importance of making decisions, how to face your fears, reduce people-pleasing behaviors, and avoid assumptions. Today, I'm going to talk about active self-reinforcement, a critical component in helping you achieve sustainable life satisfaction. If you've been following each episode, you can see they all involve making better choices for yourself and taking charge of your life. That's why today's topic of active self-reinforcement is so important. I began learning about self-reinforcement in graduate school while studying anger control for my thesis. Self-reinforcement is an effective tool used in controlling anger, and it's been around for decades. Albert Bandura, the father of social learning theory, talked about the importance of having tangible reinforcers at our disposal as rewards. However, the definition of self-reinforcement has been interpreted as positive feedback. I'd like to take a moment to note the difference between Bandura's intention when he talked about self-reinforcement and how it's often misinterpreted and taught as solely a verbal reinforcement tool. When I was learning to teach self-reinforcement, I was told to teach people to self-evaluate their performance. If their performance was worthy of praise, they were to tell themselves, "Good job." This served as a verbal pat on the back. That seems to make sense, right? Except that it doesn't. I've come to realize that Bandura was the father of social learning theory for a reason. In the animal kingdom, when we want to reinforce an animal, we give them a tangible reward, like a bone or a treat. When we want to reinforce children, we give them more than just praise. We reward them with clothing or eating out, or sometimes maybe even a trip. In other environments, like the workplace, for example, tangible reinforcers are paired with verbal praise. I agree with Bandura's theory. Self-reinforcement cannot work for people who are only being rewarded verbally. People usually look for feedback outside of themselves. Yet, if they are dissatisfied with their overall performance in life, whatever positive feedback they receive is quickly dismissed. I like to tease my clients by telling them if they heard a particular compliment 1,000,000 times, it will never be enough. Human beings are not easily fooled by receiving compliments that they feel they did not deserve, because they just reinforce feelings of inadequacy or what you may have heard called imposter syndrome. I found that everybody struggles to some degree, like feeling like a fraud or an imposter in their lives. Why is this? Because people don't feel effective in all areas of their lives, and as a result, they feel like a fraud when receiving compliments because they believe they're not deserving of them in a holistic way. For example, you could be effective at work, but if your house is not in order, you weigh the compliments on your job in light of not holding yourself to a bar in your home. Erroneous thinking like this causes people to be perpetually disappointing themselves. But doing the self-work taught me that the best judge of your performance in life is you. You are your best evaluator. This calls for you to be honest with yourself and evaluate how you may be disappointing yourself. then stop. Once you get to the core of you, telling yourself you're doing a good job is just not enough. You must dispel the thinking you've learned and replace this with active self-reinforcement. Here's how. Develop a list of tangible reinforcers and use them as you're becoming the you that you want to be. A great place to start is use them when you're completing the components that I've suggested. Here are some simple examples of tangible reinforcers. Buy yourself a gift or a treat. Take yourself on an outing. Cook yourself a special meal. Get a 10-minute back massage. In other words, create rewarding me time in ways that actively reinforce your acknowledgement of your value and the work you're doing to become your best self. Whatever you decide to do, make sure you identify the act as something that you're doing as a reward. Tell yourself you're doing this activity because you're doing a good job working toward achieving your potential. Now, before you say, I can do that, I'll be honest with you. This is very difficult to do. You would think that rewarding yourself for accomplishing your goals would be easy, right? Well, it isn't. As people, we are still reliant on outside forces for reinforcement, which is not allowed in this paradigm. Outside reinforcement is too unreliable to build upon for confidence. I challenge clients to self-evaluate and actively reinforce themselves so they can master their belief in themselves. If you've been following my series, you may have noted my recurring theme that so much of our learned behavior is introduced and starts with our parents. We are taught as children to look to the outside world for our reinforcement. Millions of people watch annual national broadcasts of entertainment ceremonies like the Oscars, Grammys, Tonys, all of these award shows. It's customary for us to want and seek rewards in the form of raises and bonuses at work. And as young children, we are taught to expect parental rewards in the forms of gifts and praise. Children are also taught that they are selfish if they focus their energy on doing something nice for themselves instead of for others. What they are not taught is that if they aren't able to do nice things for themselves, they will burden someone else with that task. It's important to recognize that you have the same value as anyone to whom you would give these tangible rewards. You are giving yourself these rewards when you've decided that you've earned them. If you work for them, then you have to be willing to accept that praise from yourself. Don't delegate reinforcement to others. Learn to own it. The decreased need for approval from others and the increase in self-reliance to determine the reward for your actions serves to increase self-confidence and decrease feelings of inadequacy. Adding this to the tools that we've discussed will help you achieve sustainable life satisfaction, and we all want this more than anything. I've devoted my life to this and created a blueprint to help you achieve it. My goal is to change the way the world thinks and help people live life affirmed. You can do it, and I believe in you so much. Thank you for watching. I wish you continued success on your journey to be your best self. And always remember, you got this.